Ready.
Okay, I think we can call the meeting to order. If we can do a roll call.
Mike Berlin, Laura Negro,
Here.
Pat Kinney,
Here.
Ron Stendor,
Here.
Marty Vitek.
Here. And then if you guys want to just introduce yourselves. Dan Trusty from American Insurance. Katie Martin, Great Lakes Insurance.
I don't know about anybody else, but I can't hear anybody.
Okay, we got Matt Erickson. We have Dan Klosky. We have Pat Nimick, and we have Dave Martinson. Is that correct?
Yeah,
And I-
but is
and I
there
saw-
another? Go ahead.
I saw Dick here earlier, so he's hanging out somewhere. He went to
Is-
his.
Is there another board member in there that is not on the committee?
No,
Okay,
so we're only missing Berlin.
Mike. Okay, we have a quorum, so we can move on to approval of the agenda. Does anybody have any corrections, additions, musings, or a motion?
This is Pat. I'll make a motion to approve.
Ron will second.
Motion from Pat, second from Ron. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, next is public comments, 3 minutes per person. Is there anyone from the public for comments online or in-house? Anyone? We can do a Bueller here. Okay. Sounds like there is no one for public comments. We can move on to approval of the Finance and Economic Development meeting minutes from April 13th, 2021. Do I have a motion for that?
Ron Stender will make a motion, we accept them.
Ron is the first. Do we have a second?
And Marty Vitek, I'll second it.
Marty's the second. Do we have any discussion? You guys are making this way too easy on me. Seeing no discussion, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Minutes carried. Next is our self-funded insurance rolls and RFP.
Okay, in your packet, you'll see the RFP, which we put together from our health study insurance group or health insurance study group, made up of, as we've discussed before, 2 county board members, 2 department heads, 2 line staff, clerk's office, and myself. So that is due on the 13th of this week, and then we'll be reviewing that basically starting like Thursday or Friday, weeding it down to 2, maybe 3 participants. And then on the 27th, the Finance Committee will meet again to pick a consultant from that responded to the RFP. Part of the reasoning here is if there's anything I've learned over the last 6 months studying insurance, I have a lot better understanding of what I don't know than before. And I think this is something that other counties I've talked to, and even here in town, Breddings, they can't speak highly enough about having a consultant, that doesn't have a horse in the race as far as recommendations and other things. So we're going forth with this. I'm very excited. I think this will really help the county get a handle on their insurance. But before we move into that, before we move into the RFP, I think it's important for the committee to understand where are we at currently, because the consultant will help us either redesign our benefit plan or redesign how we do things and how we fund this. But currently we have a benefit plan administrators, and they basically are a basically a third-party administrator for our plan. Their role is to administer our plan. It's not their plan. They're not an insurance company. We are self-insured. And with that, I've invited Dan Klosky, who is with BPA, to come here to speak and basically answer questions. He's the CEO of what do you currently have? Because when it comes to the consultants, you're going to need to know why we need a consultant, and then you'll learn more about that. So Dan, if you want to come up to the table here to this microphone, that would be best, and everybody can hear you. And just introduce yourself, and I do have what you sent me. If you want me to move forward or up or down, just let me know.
Sure. So again, I'm Dan Tusky from EPA. I'm part owner of the company. We bought it in 2006.
You can speak into the microphone, please.
You can remove your mic there, speaking that microphone. It has a cover on it.
Oh, good. Thank you. So the county's been a self-insured client of BPA's for over 30 years. So again, our role is to, as Clark alluded to, is to pay your claims according to your benefit, your deductibles, co-pays. So, you pay us a fee. So you pay us whatever it is. I don't have it memorized today. And then we also buy stop loss insurance. So the county is insured, pays their own claims up to $65,000. Above $65,000, the county is protected by stop loss insurance. Further, the county is protected with aggregate insurance. So all the claims underneath the $65,000 again protects the county so that the county's finances aren't at risk. So there's like fully insured, there's a maximum exposure that the county could hit. The county has never hit that. In the last 5 years, the study that Clark and I looked back, and the county has run very, very good. It's not what I guess been communicated to you guys and so that's has me scratching our heads as to, why. That I can't answer for you. All I can do is report every penny that we pay on behalf of the county's, medical plan and your prescription drug plan, which I've included a slide in there, is from Serviu. That is the actual pharmacy vendor that when you go to Walgreens, CVS, your local pharmacy, you present that card and they negotiate with the pharmacy at their rates. Similar to the medical plan, we rent on behalf of the county. We access medical networks. We have 2 of them, either Healthy US or Preferred One, who negotiates with all the providers. So we're not just paying, whatever they want to charge us. Each year, what we do on behalf of the county is the reinsurance is your second bucket of money. The last bucket's all your claims. So the second biggest cost for the county is the stop loss, all that, the insurance for the $65,000 and for all the claims under $65,000, the aggregate. So you can see the list of carriers that we go to on your behalf.
And Dan, I'll just interrupt here for a second. So right now we basically have like I said, everything under 65,000 individually, we pay just cash for that. Anything over 65, we get reimbursed by the reinsurance company. The overall maximum stop loss in 2021 is roughly $3.8 million. So if we had just a boatload of under 65s claims that we are paying for cash, we basically would hit up to that 3.8, and then that would in turn, anything over that would be covered also. So when Dan goes out to these companies, and I have this on the sheet here, these are reinsurance companies basically. We get a couple numbers. We get a maximum stop loss, and we also get an expected claims rate. And in this case, the expected claims rate is around $3.2 million for 2021. We're putting in slightly less than that, around $3 million. We've had years where it's been lower, years it's been higher, but you have heard me talk about this $1.7 million deficit that has accumulated over the last 15 years. Now, some of the past years have not been so bad, but nonetheless, over the years, we have accumulated that amount of money. Couple things we have done to get a better actuarial handle on the cash is we've switched how our reinsurance reimburses us. In the past, we've had, if we had a claim over $65,000, we would just, Dan and his company would just pay those bills to the providers and the medical companies and the pharmaceutical companies. And then we would in turn get reinsurance money back from that. This past winter, fall, we ended up with $1 million COVID case, a very, very expensive case. And so we took out $475,000 from the general fund to put it into the healthcare fund to cover this. So once I realized that, we immediately switched that. So now if we have these cases that are over 65 and they're known or already over 65, Dan will basically withhold the payment to those providers until we get reimbursed from the reinsurance company, and then he in turn will pay the providers. So again, it helps with cash fluctuation, so we don't have these hundreds of thousands of dollars in and out, which is very challenging, at least for me, to get my head around to say, what are we actually spending? Because some of the money we spend, we can actually get back. So I think going forward, we'll have a better idea on a cash management standpoint. And in addition, as I have explained to you before, as of January 31st, we no longer offer insurance to retirees over the age of 65. We had a cohort that was not super large, maybe, 8, 10 people or something like that. And we basically notified them in August of last year. So they had 6 months to basically find other insurance. As you're well aware, everybody who is over the age of 65 is available for Medicare. And they basically have to go out and buy a supplemental plan, which frankly was probably cheaper than what they were paying anyway. The last cohort that we have is people that are under the age of 65 that have immediately retired from the county. Now, everybody who leaves the county is eligible for COBRA benefits, which is 18 months, and they pay the equivalent of a full load, which is roughly $2,000 a month for a family plan. The county currently has a policy where after you expire your 18-month COBRA as a person who has left Ashland County, you can continue to pay the full load up until the age of 65 in order to maintain the coverage with that. And that's a benefit that has been in existence for Ashland County for many, many years. And that's a policy decision that I would like to have the consultants come in, look at the benefit design that we have. That's one of the things, in addition to having health reimbursement accounts, health savings accounts, the changing of either pharmaceuticals, going to generics. I mean, this is where basically the technicalities of it get over my head, which is why we're going to be reviewing this RFP. And then finally, I'll say one more thing about the consultant role. The consultant role money will come out of the healthcare fund. So as we go forth during this summer and we start doing budget this summer, we will basically build in the extra dollars for the consultant to have that. And the goal is overall, maybe not in 1 year, but the goal overall is to either minimize the increases in healthcare, because healthcare increases usually are 8 to 10% a year, but hopefully try to get a better handle on that and have a more honest and open appraisal of this self-funded plan. So that I just wanted to kind of interject as Dan was going through the reinsurance to make sure you understand what role the reinsurance plays in this. Okay, Dan.
Yeah, so we will work, for whatever reason, again, I don't know the heritage of why the county back to the first day you became a client of BPA, why you don't have a consultant, but it's very common. So we work with the consultants that you're going to be interviewing, I'm sure that every one of them is on our list of consultants that we work with. And they will help, your plan design, should the deductibles be changed or, the plan hasn't really changed over the last 20 years, to be honest. I mean, so I'm sure you all have seen other plans or employers. They might have just high deductible health plans where it's just a health savings account, and you might have a $2,500 deductible. So that's one thing that a consultant's role will come in and provide. Are there other programs that they can implement? I mean, so we have menus of vendors that we can bring in, to offer the county, but it's again, additional cost, but at least from a consultant's role, they can help quarterback and look at your claims data to say, where's the best bang for our dollar? Where are we gonna, if we spend X on a disease management program, are we gonna see a return? So again, that's their role, and they're looking at all your data. We provide, we'll do data dumps to all the consultants so that they can analyze every dollar bucket that we've spent in which categories. The snapshot here is what we look at as the report card. So,
And actually, if you want to read it, you can just turn around, hold your microphone, turn around, you'll be able to read it better because that screen's closer to you.
right. So you have a maximum exposure, as Clark mentioned earlier, and then you have your actual medical claims, and then you see that you have, spec claims, meaning those claims that came over.
Actually, Dan, why don't you just go from the right-hand side and just go over the, you got month, the enrollment, aggregate accumulation, just kind of walk them through what they're reading.
I actually pull mine out so I don't.
Yeah.
So you can see this is January, February, March. April's is just getting produced right now. The enrollment, again, for the total covered employee lives, this is not belly buttons. The egg accumulation, and again, that goes up and down with your employee counts. The minimum egg that's set, meaning that you have to meet that minimum based on your employee count. So we've had a little dip since the start. The actual attachment based on your employee counts. And then here's where we had a rough start to 21, where in the first month we had $500,000 of claims. RX, this gives RX. Not covered could be things that duplicates, things that we kick out from providers from not billing accurately. Then these are your spec claims, all the claims over 65,000, 394,000, and to date we've gotten 361 reimbursed from American Fidelity. So we have, still some monies obviously that we're waiting for to get back from them. So those numbers should sync up. And then there's your net paid claims. So through March, the county spent 672,000 in medical claims and RX claims. So in a perfect world, so that you can see what the year to date is at 0.92. We would like to have that number run at 0.8. So in the last 5 years, when I was looking at it, the county has been always under 0.8. So 1.0 is break even, where we're hitting max. 0.8's running at that expected level, and the prior years you've always run well under the expected in the 0.6s. So not saying that we're on a cycle right here, but just because we had some bumpy big claims right out of the gate, that's what caused your plan to be running still better, but not as good as the county has seen in prior years. So that's what I call as a report card. And
Is there any questions on this report card before we move?
I guess this is Pat, I've got a question that is related to this, I think. So earlier, the administrator said, or you had said that we had 3.2 million in expected claims, and yet the county put in 3 million into its healthcare fund this year. The county seems to have a history of underfunding its healthcare fund. And so when do you have a projected unexpected claims for each coming year?
so we'll we'll get in the middle of August, or I should say the latter part of August, we'll get a initial number from the reinsurance carrier. You know, they will submit your data after July, and they'll give us an initial projection and kind of a renewal for 1/1. But then they like to have at least August claims to then make sure their numbers in line, or maybe you're trending a little bit better, you know, in August, that caused that forecast to be a little bit better. So, but the initial blush should be for your end of the month, August meeting.
And that's just for the current year, or you'd go back and average it over a number of years?
That'll be for the projection for 22. As far as the report card is how your plan is running, you know, that comes out each month as to what your costs are versus, you know, expected.
So with other organizations, do some of them say, okay, I've got an expected claims of, I'll say the 3.2 million here, but do some of them take that number and then modify that by a slight percent up or down just to err on the side of caution so that they don't underfund it? And if so, what examples come to mind?
Right. I mean, so initially when a client's going to go into the self-insurance arena, they're probably going to fund at the maximum. They're going to budget based on your maximum exposure. But after you get a good, you know, track record, which the county has, you should be able to budget based on your expected level that's provided. Especially if you looked over historicals that you've never even hit expected. Expected should be a cushion. I mean, you know, where you should be confident in that number.
So what happens in the years in organizations where, let's say, the claims are higher because the employees pay a portion of this, and right now as we are set up, if the claims go over what we budget for, the county pays the full cost of that versus the employees picking up a portion of that. Are there plans where people have a few percent more to the expected, and then if it does come in under, that they set that money aside? Is that
correct? Yeah, I mean, if it's better than good, you know, that's in your nest egg for a bad year. They kind of just remove it, you know, so that it offsets the year that you have the blip over, you know, what you set your budget number at. And unfortunately, it ran over it. You're not having to, you know, go grab it from a different fund.
so you keep that, they keep it in a separate fund just for those purposes to
Okay.
even things out in case, because the claims are typically going to be above or below the expected,
Right.
but it just then acts as a reserve to
They,
fund those differences.
correct. They'll set up a reserve account just for their medical plan.
Okay. thank
So,
you.
and we do have I'll interject, we do have a separate passbook account at Northern State Bank that is just dedicated for healthcare expenses. And so nothing else goes in there besides reinsurance, employee. So like the highway department actually writes a check every month for their staff. It comes in there. We take the reinsurance money comes in there. The money that we pay out for medical claims, dental claims, reinsurance claims all comes out of there. And the issue that we've had is when we've had these big swings, we need to keep, you know, we have to borrow money from the general fund to keep that thing solvent, which is where $475,000 we had taken out in January to cover this. Now, the current balance of that, I don't see Heather on the line, but the last time I checked, we were at, I don't know, we had like maybe 300 some odd $1,000 in there. And I kind of asked Heather what her comfort level is, because these things go out, I believe, on a weekly basis.
Yes.
Yes. And so I asked her what her comfort level was, and she didn't like to get below $200,000 in there because otherwise you have these issues that go in and out. So, you know, it's one of those things we might be able to look at, maybe taking $100,000 and putting back into the general fund if the fund stays healthy over the next couple months in order to go from 1.7 million down to 1.6 million. But in the long run, I don't have a path for you to pay that money back right now, because I think it would be, you would have to basically increase insurance by, you know, $500,000-$600,000 a year for the staff and for the departments in order to pay off that loan. And granted, it took you 15 years to get there. Maybe you spend 10 years paying it back at $200,000 or $300,000 extra a year. So I think there's two issues to face with this when we go into our budget period, which is one, We need to probably have a better appraisal and, getting closer to that minimum getting over the minimum attachment, in between minimum attachment and basically expected claims. Get somewhere up in there, which for us would be maybe $250,000 extra. And if we want to add more to that, in order to start building that balance back up, we should add another 100 in there, which is why when we talk about the budget going later on today in this meeting, I'll be discussing maybe putting in an extra $300,000 to $350,000 into the healthcare system every year, which is general levy dollars, which obviously we can't raise the general levy. So those are kind of the challenges with this. And this is why I kind of wanted Dan to be able to answer your questions in his role as we're going through this.
With that, are there questions, other questions, what our role is for the county?
You had mentioned these monthly reports. Who do these monthly reports go to? Because I have not seen any of them.
I would imagine Heather and Clark, and I'm not certain that there's some other reports that are included that are more privacy related. I mean,
With HIPAA, yes.
so I mean, they could, Clark and or Heather could distribute this one if this kind of the report card. The others, would need to be a privacy officer person.
So Heather and I have access to the monthly reports that come out, and they have everything from, who goes to the doctor, what doctor they saw, what the charges were, what drugs are they taking. So we get some very sensitive information. But because we are the insurance company, we basically see that. That's
I
protected.
understand that.
And then this we could certainly send this sheet out.
Are there reports that can say where or are we getting into the place where we're looking at the people with the RFP? Because are there reports where we could see without people's names that can be run, that it's here's where our major costs are, so we know where our spend is, here's what kind of medications we're taking and things? So there are those.
Yeah, absolutely. We can send those. We can run that type of report that gets into all the things you mentioned, monthly, quarterly. You give us your wish. I think I can share that claims review report. I don't know if the committee has seen that. It's it's called a claims review, and I think we did it for maybe 2020 data, but I could send up a first quarter of 21 and take a look at that. I believe you'll be, this will answer the questions you just asked about.
Now, are we, as we're looking at these designated roles of you or who the people we are looking for to do more detailed administration, quarterly reports with our spend and things, who would be the one that would take the lead on updating either the finance committee, exec, or the county board, so we all are on the same page about what our healthcare is costing us and what kind of changes we have to do?
Yeah, and we work with your consultant to provide them the data, but they would be the ones delivering,
Okay.
tell you here's what they're seeing, and that's their expertise. And then their suggestions on, what could we do? What could the county do different to help, manage whatever it may be, specialty drugs, and having some.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just a quick, sorry, just quick interjection. 9:30, Mike Berlin and Gary Murdoch entered the meeting. Thank you.
Another question then. You said that the plan, that it should be running at 0.8 and now it's 0.92, but our plan over the time that you have been aware of it, managing our, being the people that paid out our claims, is it running at its most efficient, or would a consultant make it more efficient for us?
Unfortunately, I don't think anybody can make a claim go away. They can suggest other programs, be it cash pay doctors, and incenting your members to, go to different providers that maybe are, The quality is there, but the cost is extremely less. You know, for instance, and again, it's a bit of a drive, but in Woodbury, Minnesota, you can get a colonoscopy for $2,100. You know, some of our providers in this area, you know, just on a routine colonoscopy are going to charge over $5,000. So those are things that a consultant can at least say, here's what we've done with other plans, and here's kind of how we incented members to utilize, you know, these quality providers, but lower cost providers, you know, with their other clients.
Okay, so at this moment, we don't have any of those, whatever, like colonoscopy, hip replacement, knee replacement, whatever. We do not have anybody that with any incentives for people to go to places where it is cheaper to have these procedures.
Right, the plan does not, is again, what we would do is we would program so that when we're adjudicating the claim, it's gonna go to the proper tier, or notifying you that you just had a member utilize Twin Cities Orthopedic. So thus you can, whatever incentive you set up, you could then, you know, say you got a free, you know, day off, or you got $500 incentive. That again is between you and you know, your members. What we're doing is you know, with the consultant's direction would say, here's how we want the plan to pay when we see these providers. Please program it so that it's at this tier level versus our standard deductible level.
Okay, and then the same with, say, our prescription services. There haven't been any carve-outs or details done with that because that is not your wheelhouse.
Right, so like in your packet, Servview, again, is your pharmacy benefit manager. They have this program that, you know, they looked at your prescription spend, and then they recommended implementing this. I think there was some small savings on, you know, a few members that might be utilizing specialty drugs. So, you know, those are things that, again, a consultant will also bring to the table to say, you know, we've utilized these things with other clients, you know, specialty drugs. I mean, everybody knows the commercials that are on repeated. Well, the cost for those drugs are astronomical. So these are programs to help at least buy it at a, you know, same prescription, but at a lower cost.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and I guess the main point of this is we are one of the few people that actually administer their own plans without somebody with either dedicated on staff that is a insurance expert or a consultant, which are insurance experts, you know, and so we basically don't have the expertise to manage this ourselves, which is my kind of summary of this operation. So, and that's where I'm hoping that the new company consultant's role will be to help guide us make correct decisions, look at benefit plan designs, look at the deductibles, look at health savings accounts, look at health reimbursement accounts, how to manage our costs going forward. And that's where, you know, this RFP, which is in your packet and coming back this week, that's what I'm hoping to get out of this.
Mike, are you going to run the meeting now? Or did you want me to continue?
Oh, you're doing fine.
Okay. I see. Like I said to everybody else, you guys are making this easy on me. Is there any more questions? And this
we
was
can-
just an information piece, correct?
Yeah, Heather and I can give you these aggregate stop loss reports on a monthly basis. We can just email those out or put them in the packets if we meet. That's no problem at all. You know, but I think part of it is you have to understand what you're looking at, which is, yeah, some of these things, like you get these high cost claims, you know, there's $500,000 of medical claims in January, and in here in March, you're getting 360,000 back. So you do have to kind of interpret the cash flow on this. So
Yeah,
It is, but if we have a deck that we can look at and it's explained to our members, it is very easy to know what we're looking at then. It's a kind of an onboarding process then. Go ahead, Dan, sorry.
If if you don't want to study or get into the weeds, I always just look at that, as we call it, the loss ratio, you know, and if you want to just take a quick snapshot, how is our plan running? You know, we want to see that hopefully continue to drop, you know, below the 0.8, and, you know, then you can get into the weeds backwards if when time permits.
And explain one more time what the loss ratio actually is.
Right, so it's not a good tagline, but it's really just how your plan's running versus the maximum liability. So in theory, you call it loss ratio, but it doesn't account towards your premiums you've paid. This is just raw claims, prescription claims versus what the carrier has set at the top level. So it's just saying that we don't want to hit the maximum. Obviously, if we budgeted at expected, then we're really going to be underfunded more. So that's, you know, so it is loss ratio, but it's not all your money's out, because it doesn't include the stop loss premiums. So, and you should see a better, you know, less fluctuation now that we're only paying claims up to the 65,000, and then we'll suspend and we hold those other claims until we actually get the monies back from the carrier. And then what we do is simultaneously release. So they're getting paid, you're getting the money in your checkbook. So the county's not, you know, basically we weren't utilizing, you know, taking their money on free loan, you know, because it's not like you pay a fee to stop paying at 65 until we get it. So it should help with cash flow if we do have an unfortunate 100,000, you know, or like we had $1 million claim. You're not funding all those and then just waiting for all the monies to come back.
And the final piece of this healthcare benefit plan we offer our employees is we have a dental plan through Pat Nimick, and I see Pat left, but that is also self-funded. And so that basically we charge the employees $25, $35, or $50 a month, and then we just pay the claims out of this healthcare fund, and that goes through the Delta Dental network. So, and you know, so it's, again, it's not insurance, but you're buying into the discounts that Delta Dental gives you when you enter a Delta Dental in-network provider, and they pay X amount of dollars for these procedures. So, and again, healthcare is not a profit center. You offer healthcare and benefits to your employees as part of the incentive to keep them here. The Delta Dental if we split out the Delta Dental, the expenses over revenue that go out on a yearly basis over the past 5 or 6 years are anywhere from $40,000 to $95,000 a year. So it's not a huge amount of money, but it is, you know, when you compare yourself to $3 million of healthcare, but it is just part of the benefit package that we offer employees. And again, we would look at our consultants to look at what does that look like for us? Do we want to change the 25, 35, 50 to, you know, 30, 40, 60? Do we want to change the benefit design, the maximum allowed visits, what does a crown cost? What does a bridge cost? Those are all things that basically a consultant would analyze that obviously we don't have the knowledge or the time to look at. So, yeah. Any other questions for Dan? I really appreciate Dan coming here. That was very useful for us to learn more about that. And
I appreciate the county being a long time client of BPA's.
Okay, if there's no more on that, we can move to the next agenda item, which is set budget guidelines.
okay, so at the last finance committee meeting, the finance committee wanted to at least start the budget process this month. I think there's 3, maybe 4 items for the committee to talk about. One would be, do they want to build in staff increases into the budget for the staff? There wasn't any There wasn't any cost of living or raises for staff this year. Hence, we gave everybody 40 hours of paid time off of personal leave that is non-accumulative, expires December 31st, is not paid out if you leave. So it's kind of just a one-time thing. So we have to decide that. We have to decide the kind of the debt levy goal, the overall general levy goal. And then the fourth issue, which just came up yesterday at 4 p.m., is we got the fiscal guidance from the U.S. Treasury Department on our $3 million. So this is the American Rescue Plan dollars. And it's the documents I have, they're like, maybe there's about 170 pages of information. We'll have to read through. One of the things we'll look at, I think from a policy perspective is, do we want to look at these items here in yellow on this sheet, which is non-mandated expenses. So these are things that we don't have to do, but out of the graciousness of your heart, you do. The question is, do we want to look at taking this $473,000 and analyzing it to see if that federal money could be utilized for it? And so I think that's a policy decision for the Finance Committee to look at. When I think about the budget that we've just kind of scratched out here, and we're just starting with the baseline budget from this year, I would think we probably would need another $300,000 in healthcare increases. I mean, again, the consultant will give us better information on that, but that's my analysis, that we've been chronically underfunding it, and I don't think we should do that. Staff salaries at maybe 1.5%, maybe 2% would be $150,000 to $200,000, and travel and conferences, which we kind of cut out, would be $35,000. Basically, right here, we're about, and our general levy dollars don't really change much because of the general levy limit law. So we're about $567,000 in the hole if we account for these increases. Now, if you take some of that federal money and take some of that federal money out, it gets a lot better because you basically are supplanting general levy dollars that go for your non-mandated contributions, community gifts basically. And if you take that out, that's $473,000. That gets you very close to what that is. The discussion on debt levy have two factors in them. We have issued $1.5 million debt for the budget year 2021. Of that, basically $520,000 goes to the road department for road construction, and I think $350,000 went for equipment at the highway department. And then the rest of that we basically utilized to pay off a $1.8 million line of credit, which you guys had when I came here. So we basically converted that to an 8-year loan, so we have to pay that off. We have a loan for the downtown building, the 514 Main Street building. And then there's a loan for the Sanborn Health and Human Services building. And then other than that, it's fairly small capital purchases. We have a couple squads, a pickup truck, radio equipment, those kind of things. So that's what the $1.5 million comes from there. When we look at the debt levy, and in your packet is the 3 different scenarios for the highway department. This is where it's going to get a little more complicated, so you're going to have to follow along. You have at $520,000 a year for debt levy. If you don't increase that, and you can see on this chart here, 2022, the highway department's going to need to pull out an extra 250 plus 650, no. Oh, 1.1 million plus 250,000. So basically 1.3 million the highway department is going to pull out of their fund. And this is where we get into the concept that the highway department has roughly $2.5 million of money that's allocated for a fund for them, but they don't have a separate bank account. So it's a promissory note. And as you've had over the decades, as you've had budget shortfalls, you've been basically just utilizing general fund dollars, any, and things that aren't in a separate bank account. The problem, and this goes back to what the auditors were talking about last September, when the auditor said you're at a dangerously low level of unallocated fund balance. You should be roughly around $4 million. And as of 2019, you were around 900,000. I'm thinking we're probably gonna be around $600,000 in 2020. So that's where the kind of the overall problem. One of it is this healthcare problem, where loans have come out of the general fund to pay for healthcare. And another is basically every time there's a budget overrun, you end up just taking money out of the general fund to pay the bills, basically. So when you look at debt levy, if you keep the debt levy at $520,000 for road construction, meaning we'll leave the debt levy at 1.5 million, the highway department, if they're going to keep on this schedule, is going to need over $1 million in cash. That's going to put a significant cash issue on the county because we don't have that much cash, or it would be very challenging for us to remove that kind of money from there. Matt put together a couple scenarios where we would have actual debt levy every year. So we'd go 520 this year, 820, then $1 million, then 600, then 1.3, 1.7, 1.7, 4 million. So as these road projects come in, obviously some years there's more work, some years there's less work. And then if you basically moved it to kind of have more of a even keel, if you have $1 million a year just dedicated towards road work, which would be a 400 some odd $1,000 increase, that would keep you solvent on road work up until 2028, it looks like. So this is kind of an interaction between the finance committee and the highway committee. The highway committee has approved basically these projects going out to 2034, but it's going to be more or less up to the full county board when they set the debt levy if they're going to be able to do those projects and what happens if you don't do those projects. And then in addition, I have a fifth concept actually, now that we're talking about it. One of the things, in order to increase your unallocated general fund dollars, so that's what we talked about 5 minutes ago. The auditors say are $900,000 or 8% of unallocated fund balance. It should be 25%. In order to build that back up to have a more stable government, you're going to have to leave money on the table or bring more money in. So you're going to have to find $3 million over the next number of years just to put back into the general fund. One of the ways to do that is basically looking at increasing the debt levy outside of the highway discussion. You could increase debt levy also, add in an extra $500,000 a year to pay yourself back for court order judgments, liability insurance, or property insurance, or risk management insurance. These are allowable debt levy uses in state law. And part of that is, as you get these high cost placements, and in your packet, you can see a net out of about $1.4 million of court orders that basically you really can't budget for because you have no choice to pay them. There isn't any, you don't have the option to not budget for them. And so you just take the money out of the general fund to pay for it. And some of your expenses over the last 10, 15 years have probably gone towards these. In addition, there's probably about $250,000 for insurance, basically liability, property insurance, and risk management services. The state obviously has a vested interest to make sure that counties are protected. They don't want counties, basically due to budget issues, cutting back on their property or liability insurance because there is no state chapter for bankruptcy for a county. And so the state basically says, if you basically don't have enough cash on hand to pay for your insurance, you're just use debt levy in order to pay for it, because you really have to have that. So those are kind of your basic discussion points for today, which is staff increases, debt levy overall, subdivisions of that, debt levy for road department, debt levy to pay back, court orders, overall general levy, and then uses of the American Rescue Plan Act dollars, and direct staff to read the 170 pages to find out if some of that money is would be allowable use for those highlighted areas of the non-mandated community contributions. So, Chair Lady, how would you like to proceed?
There is probably a better way to do this than to not. Is there one of those topics you guys want to start with?
This is Pat. I'd like to start with something.
Yep.
Obviously absent from what the administrator just laid out, which was debt levy, is looking at how we can save money. All that's happened in the county for a long time has been shifting things to debt levy. And we know that we can't raise a general levy without a referendum. At some point, debt has to be paid back. And we continue to expend more than we take in. And so what that says is we need to look at changing how we operate. We need to look at efficiencies. Yes, we need to look at more ways to bring in money that don't go to the debt levy. But absent from that list the administrator gave us was looking at how we could be more efficient. I suspect all of you got the Wisconsin County Magazine the other day. If you read the articles on justice reform, I think there's some topics in there that we could delve into to see if there's anything related to those that could better serve our community and reduce the cost for the county. Our sheriff's department was $400,000 over budget last year. I didn't know that until I read it in the paper. And we have not had a discussion of why the sheriff's department was $400,000 over budget, what we could look at changing. And it also brings to mind, why don't we have accounting processes so that these things are caught sooner than later, so we can look at making adjustments. I did not vote for the referendum in April. I didn't vote for the referendum 3 years ago. And I will not vote for a referendum until I feel confident the county has done everything it can to re-examine its operations on becoming more efficient. When we talk about moving things to the debt levy, all we're doing is kicking the can down the road unless we're simultaneously looking at how we can change things here to make things more efficient. We are the second poorest county. We have the lowest rate of net new construction, and you can only raise your general levy based on net new construction. We are the leading edge of this whole problem with how things are set up in Madison in terms of how we fund ourselves. And so we are going to have to deal with these issues before anybody else, and we're probably going to have to deal with them a long time until things change in Madison. I think we need to look at changing some things here, because what's going to happen is the same thing that happened last year. Last July 15th, the Finance Committee voted to direct the administrator to prepare a budget with a 0% increase. We got the budget October 15th, and he proposed a 4.37% increase and said, I couldn't do a 0% budget. So if we couldn't figure things out last year, and we know things are tighter this year, and they're only going to continue to get tighter, if we can't solve those problems, I don't see where anything's going to be different this year, except a proposal to shift more to the debt levy and probably at a rate higher than the taxpayers are going to be happy with. And at some point, you do need a referendum passed to increase the general levy, because at some point you can't move everything to debt levy, and when interest rates go up, the problems are going to get harder. We're going to have to balance the increases in the debt levy, because if those are high, with the desire to pass a referendum to increase the general levy at some point. If we increase that levy too much, you'll never get a general levy increase.
We do have our consultants coming in to help with digging into our books that Clark has already lined up. So that's one of the things that will have to be done, and they are going to look for efficiencies also. As for the sheriff's department, I'm chair of PPLE, and we are starting to watch quarterly budgets with actual versus spent, to keep an eye on that. And I encourage every committee to start watching those. I'd like to work up like I talked with the healthcare plan, a deck, so that way people can look at the simpler numbers to see, instead of having to dig through 86 pages to figure out which part is the expenses and costs and stuff. So it's more efficient for the committees. And the part where the sheriff's department went over on their budget was overtime. And that is because we're short-staffed. So those things are being watched. I think some of the pieces we have in place with the consultants coming in for the actual budget items, and that, Clark, when does that start?
What does what start?
Your two consultant guys digging into the books.
So we've started the process. We basically sent out a survey to county board members. We're going to be sending out a survey to all the department heads. They're going to be on site May 25th, 26th in order to interview maybe a half dozen department heads concerning budget development, kind of information that's needed. We're going to be granting them access to the online software program next week or the week after that. And then they'll be coming up with some of the recommendations, I would think probably in, late June, I would think. So, yeah, so that process is coming along, because we don't have finance directors, you all know, and we don't have the staff to do most of the things that people want. And so we're hoping that they can set us on the right path to develop better reporting standards, a better analysis for cash. As I was talking about with the Department of Revenue late last fall, early winter, before the American Rescue Plan dollars, I was very concerned about your cash flow for late 22 and early 23. Now that we have the $3 million coming, if we can offload some general levy expenses, which will be a policy decision from this committee, onto the federal dollars, that will help the cash position. The caveat there is obviously you're using one-time money for what you traditionally have been funding. And the county board, as you well know, I had put forth to cut the community contributions in order to help balance the budget, and the county board voted against that because the county board did not want to cut community contributions. They wanted to spend that money. So I think, from a policy perspective, we need to, if you want to start the budget process now, we need to have policy decisions made in order to give guidance to the department heads, which are, again, what are you going to use for, what are you going to do for debt levy for roads? What are you going to use for debt levy to replace general funds? Are you going to direct the staff to have an increase? Are you going to, propose a general healthcare fund increase in order to balance that? And then that will basically allow the staff to come forward with proposed budgets that will probably not be in balance with what the county has. And then during the months, my expectation is during the months of June and July and August, we would probably bring in the department heads to talk about their budgets so you can actually look at them. The budget process and the timeline that you've seen before obviously doesn't really get going till September. You get your healthcare information in September, you get your shared revenue in September, you get your PILT payments in September, you get your equalized value and your levy limit worksheet. That all happens in September. And so the work that you do this summer is more of education for you to look at it, to say, where's the misalignment between revenues and expenses? And so when September happens, you can make decisions from an educated standpoint. But the first part is having you come up with your expectations for the budget. you want to give staff increase? Let's start simple. Do you want to have the staff, do you want to have the department heads build in a staff increase for the staff? That's a simple question. That's a yes or no question. And if it is a yes question, what is the amount? 1.5%, 2%, quarter percent, 0%? That has to start from this committee.
We have thoughts on that or a motion?
A non-finance member, Gary, wants to make a comment. You can't see him, he's off camera. Would you like to give him?
Go ahead, Gary.
Okay, thank you. Here's a consideration. The health insurance is out of control. The dental insurance is a whole nother issue in part of that. A decision has to be made if we're going to start passing more of a cost onto the employees. Now, if you're talking about a staff increase and you're not going to do anything with health insurance, you got a problem. So you almost have to join those two at the hips. I don't know how we can be talking about staff increases when we're running such a budget deficit. But if you want to give a raise, then you got to look at the health insurance. And if you're going to not do anything on health insurance, it's all part of a package. An employee, I was a county employee for 9 years. And don't get me wrong, but if you talk to the citizens on the street, we've got a pretty good plan. So we have to figure out if we're going to do something for the staff, is it an increase in wages and they pay more for health insurance, or vice versa? You got to look at them together. You can't talk about, I'll tell you what, you don't want the press to hear about staff increases when we're running a budget deficit. It's just that simple. The people that talk to me on the street are saying, you've got to get the budget in control. So I say, if you're going to talk about one, you got to talk about one. If you give an increase, what do you do for the health insurance? You can't keep running $1 million deficits or more. And so that's where you got to put them together. It's a package. As an employee for the county, they get a salary and they get benefits. So they're interlocked. One way or the other, you've got to talk about what do you want to do for the employees if we can do it. And then they're together, they're not separate. And that's where I'm coming from. Thank you.
Gary, you missed that piece. Before you got here, we had the BPA guy, Dan, talk, and we did clarify more of how a consultant could help us with those costs and recommend those kinds of changes. Because while he said we have been running relatively efficient, a consultant can make those deeper cuts, suggest those increases, and keep the plan up to date, because basically the plan has been running itself for the last 20 years. There haven't been any changes. So that step is already kind of in there.
And
I
I heard that,
Go ahead.
but here's my concern. You can't keep self-funding this policy, because if you have two employees that have $500,000 or $600,000 claims, it's going to bankrupt the county even more. We've got to get, and if that's what they're going to do, that's fine. But we've got to get it to a point where an employee knows that if they go to the doctor, as they suggested, that they can go to this doctor and not that doctor. There's no plans out there in the real world that says you can just unlimited go to any place you want, and no matter what the cost, the county's going to bear that cost. We can't do that. But what I'm saying is, when that proposal comes through as to how that plan changes, and dental is an additive, it's not part of health insurance, it's an extra. We've got to look at what the costs are for our employees, and then what can the employee bear, what can the county bear, because we can't keep taxing ourselves out of this or putting it off to next year. And the stimulus money is just that. It's a one-time money this year and next year. If we supplant that, and I'm all in favor of saying, if there's places we can take and spend that stimulus money, but in 2 years, we're going to be right back in the same boat and say, oh, we didn't do anything because we had stimulus money. I know these are tough decisions and somebody's going to feel the heat, but I'd rather take the heat now than in 2 years. Thanks.
Yeah, the consultant does help us with those things too. And then we do have the budget people that are working in our books. So those two pieces I'm a little concerned that we're starting to make budget decisions before we have a good overview from consultants who can tell us what our possibilities are. That's my concern with this. I know we want to start this budgetary process early so we can get a jump on it, but right now we've got 2 carts before our horse. I'm not real. I understand there's things we can shift to the debt levy, and I share concerns with Pat. But Clark, can you explain some of the court order things again to show how that works out? Because I know that's a little different piece of it.
Okay. So to take a step backwards, when you're talking about debt levy, is broken up into 2 parts. As we talked about before, we have some long-term obligations, $1.8 million line of credit that we have to clean up, and the 2 buildings. I think there's a couple car loans in there too, but those things are long-term obligations, which you have to pay for over the next, whatever, 8-10 years. The rest of the debt levy, you basically are just paying off on a one-time 63-day loan. So in this case, we issued $1.5 million of debt levy. We set the debt levy at $1.5 million on November 9th of last year. We actually took out a loan of $1,063,000. So that basically is the difference between our long-term obligation loan payments and our one-time payments. And so we paid off the $1 million. We paid that off in, I think, early February when we got our tax payments in. So that money basically is just a way that the state allows you to fund capital operations. So when we're talking about using debt levy, not only for roads and equipment, those are one-time 63-day loans. The same thing is if you want to build money back into your general fund. I mean, I'm not going to be here when you guys, need to get your money back in the bank, but I'm just giving you my honest appraisal, which is you're going to have to use some debt levy to put money in the general fund. I don't see you having enough money to leave $3 million and just put back and to have a healthy balance. That's going to be a problem. So when you look at these court orders, so these are placements that we have had. This is broken up into 2 sections. There's a health and human services placement, and then there's court orders from upstairs. So the health and human services, you start at the lowest cost services, which are like, foster care, group homes, CBRFs, which are, community-based rehabilitation facilities, all the way down to Institute for Mental Disorders, which is the bottom line here, $421,000. We spent $2 million on that, and we got back from the state $800,000. So there's a net of $1.1 million that we spent. And then the other court orders are guardian ad litem's, psychiatric evals, court ordered guardianships, and adversarial counsels. And again, we have no control over those. A couple years ago, you had an adversarial counsel bill for $100,000 for somebody. Again, you don't get the budget for those things because it doesn't make it, you can't budget for them. The biggest risk factor here, which is why I'm kind of bringing this topic to your attention, is the IMDs, the Institute for Mental Disorders. These run around $1,000 a day. Our next door neighbor, Sawyer County, has 3 people that they're going to be spending $2 million this year for those 3 people in Institute for Mental Disorders. And there's nothing that the county did. It's just, they just happen to have bad luck with 3 people that the court ordered them to be placed. And so if that happens, I'm providing you a tool in the future, whether you use it this year or not, it's up to you to decide, but you're going to have this tool in your toolbox, because if you get a $2 million bill you have to pay, You don't have the cash. That's the problem of not having a large cash reserve. Sawyer County has $10 million in the bank because they have a high general fund balance. They can afford to do it for 1 year. But if it comes in a second year, they're going to do the same thing. We wouldn't have that option because we don't have the extra money in the bank to pay for $2 million worth of placements. I'm just providing you a little education for where your future is going to be. And I'm just, this is what you're going to have to face.
Is there more discussion?
This is Pat. The numbers are all going to add up to more than the county board's going to approve for a tax increase this fall, if you throw all of this together. When I went out and talked to the voters, they were clearly frustrated with the tax increases that they've seen, and they're probably as much or more frustrated with what they perceive as the county not doing everything it can to examine its operation to make changes to be more efficient. And I think referendums are going to continue to fail until people in the county are convinced we've done everything that we can possibly do. And the sooner we do that, the better. I'm going to go back to the criminal justice issue here, partly because it's a big part of the budget. And yes, I know it's the overtime is the biggest killer on this. But I think it's the board's responsibility, more than anybody else's, to drive some changes and then examine everything. When we turn over every stone, we're not going to find opportunities to save money or do different things under every stone we turn over. But I believe that we've got to turn every stone over that we can and look at how things change. In the Criminal Justice Coordinating Committee in January, the judge emphasized that he wants evidence-based decisions on what we do and how we do it in our criminal justice system. He wants data. And that's partly so that we get the best outcomes so that we can for people in the system, their families and community, but also our taxpayers. The judge mentioned one item in particular to look at as we had that discussion. We have a TAG program here, which is the Treatment Alternatives and Diversion Program. I asked in that meeting, and I'm saying this because this was in a public meeting, I asked if they had data and evidence that they're tracking so they could renew that grant. And they said that they didn't have any data that they were tracking. And part of what that means is we operate a criminal justice system here with incarceration, 4 pods in the jail, and we keep doing everything the same way. I think if we're going to change any of that, we've got to look at everything in detail. We've got to understand what we can and can't change, what the processes are, what the boundaries are, the legal issues in changing all of that, and then see if as a community and as a board, we can agree on some things that we want to do differently. I don't think it's our sheriff's department to say, hey, let's change this and that necessarily, although they could. But I think it's really the responsibility of the board to delve into those issues and see what we can change. That would save us money on an ongoing basis, which is obviously helpful as far as the budget goes. But at some point, and it's going to be a few years down the road yet, at some point, this whole thing with the budget is going to result in just big things getting cut. And usually when big things get cut, it happens all of a sudden and without a lot of thought. I'd much rather we do our homework, be thorough, start sooner than when we get down to the last minute, and then just make what seemed like unthought out changes just because there's no alternative to it. And yes, interest rates are going to rise, and this whole thing with debt levy, 5, 6, 7, 8 years from now is going to be much harder. Whatever we have to face today is going to be much easier than if we continue to do the same thing and leave this another 6, 8, 10 years down the road.
Clark, with Abby being hired in the court system there as their coordinator, isn't she starting data collection programs currently?
Abby works 20 or 25 hours a week, so I'm not aware of what kind of metrics she's doing. These are more longitudinal studies, which are, it's hard to provide evidence that you prevented something from happening, because you don't have a control group. And so because your control group is not self-selected, these are people volunteering to be part of this, or the judge is basically encouraging them to do this versus going to jail. It's a diversionary tactic. So yeah, she would be the one we'd have to talk to find out if if what she does on her 20 or 25 hours a week is saving people from going to the jail. I mean, when you look at your $6.6 million worth of general levy, basically 4.5 million goes to the sheriff's department. It's not very complicated. I mean, if you basically want to decrease the sheriff's budget, the problem is your only choice is decreasing your coverage of sheriff deputies. You go down to 8 hours a day, you go to 10 hours a day. The jail, we have very limited capacity to limit who comes into the jail. Again, the court says these people have to be put into jail, and we have to manage that. Technically, it's up to the sheriff to limit how many people come into the jail, which we found out during the COVID crisis. We currently have 28 people we're monitoring in electronic bracelets. We have decreased the amount of money for outside placements. Historically, we're spending $100,000 a year on placing people in other jails because our jail has never been large enough. Or we've had issues where we've had a wrong segregation population between females and males, or there's issues with violence between people who are in here. So we've seen a decrease in that this year and last year because nobody was taking transfers. So yeah, the sheriff is the most expensive thing that we spend money on, but ultimately it'll be up to the county board to decide, do they want less sheriff budget? I guess it's a pretty simple way to look at it.
Yeah, and as the chair of PPLE and working with the court system, I've been in communication with them about continuing some of the monitoring programs. So we do have less transportation because, when you transport a prisoner to a different jail, it's 2 officers that have to go with it. Mostly it's a full day. So, we've already been working on those kind of things. I get there's sore spots for some of this, but the thing that I find when I talk to people is the people don't want a bunch less of coverage from the sheriff's department. So, as we work through this, we can keep pointing at that too. And really we can do that. But what cost does that come at too? We're working for efficiencies. We're working for the best care of the inmates that we've got in there. Otherwise, then people need to start kicking out ideas, because we talk about how we don't want to put anything on debt levy, but I'd like to hear some more concrete plans, because I guess as we go through this, we're going to have more concrete plans and ideas. And I still think it comes from each individual committee as they're watching through, like we just talked about. Highway Department committee just passed, what the budget was for them. Was that in taking into consideration what our financial position is? Each department and each committee needs to be looking at as they go through. I get that we have each one of these departments that has needs, and there is uncontrollable costs in spots where we are mandated for it. But every time we pass something in committee, that comes and lands on us here in finance. So when we talk to the county board, some of that shift has to come from the committees too. Because sometimes I feel like we operate as totally different islands, and then when we get to the county board, we're like, what the heck happened? That's why I started asking for quarterlies for the sheriff's department and Health and Human Services. I've got a piece of that, and for emergency management and for our caretaking of our properties. Because that's what one I'm chair of. So I can ask for those things, but each chair has to ask for those things in their committees and dig down into that too. I mean,
Chair,
I want to hear from you guys.
yeah, Chairwoman Negro.
Yes.
We have Highway Commissioner Erickson here. And, you know, part
I
of this
know.
discussion,
I just,
I would
I
encourage you
picked
to
on him because he's here. You know, it was the one that got brought up.
walk you through, which is, yeah, if you don't want debt levy, here's your outcome. If you're
Yeah.
willing to hear him.
Of course.
Why don't you come to this one in the center here?
Yeah, and like I said, I just picked on that because Gary had talked about it and because I know he's here. But
So I put together a plan many years out to 2034, right? And maybe Clark, I don't know if the highway committee per se voted to accept this. I put this out there as an informational. You know, we basically, they vote each year on the budget for the next year. This is just informational where we need to spend dollars in the future. One thing that this improvement plan does not take fully into planning is there is possible grant dollars coming. You know, the governor's budget has some grant dollars we will apply for. The federal has grant dollars we're going to apply for. So hopefully that could help us to balance this out. But if you look at it over that time period, if we keep it at $520,000 per year as it has been funded for our highway improvements, at the end of 2034, we would be $8 million short in that funding. As I said, there's going to be grant dollars available. There's not going to be $8 million in grant funds available. There might be 2, 3, 4 million, but not 8. The other thing to consider is if all these projects are either we call them mill and fill projects, which are basically asphalt replacement. We take off 1 inch of the existing asphalt, we add 2 inches of new asphalt. This costs, you know, roughly $100,000 per mile. If we leave these projects, go to the future and do not keep up with them, the asphalt deteriorates in such a way that you cannot do the mill and fill project anymore. You have to go to a full asphalt reconstruct. That includes pulverizing all the old asphalt down. You know, we might have 6, 8, 10 inches of asphalt, old asphalt in there. You have to pulverize it all out, and then you have to lay in new asphalt. And you're looking at putting in 4 to 6 inches of new asphalt, depending on what you want it for, you know, highway loadings for trucks. You know, some of our say GG from Clam Lake to Mellon is a heavy used by trucks going to the mills, logging trucks, milk trucks. You know, we can't just have 2 inches of asphalt in there. We have to have more than that to support that. So if we do not keep up on the highway projects and keep them to the mill and fill and keep the costs fairly reasonable, you know, if we have to leave our asphalts deteriorate too far gone and then have to go to full reconstruct, we're going to add probably 2.5 to 3 times more of the cost to do that process. So in effect, it'll cost us, you know, a lot more money than I have planned here. We might save it in the short term. We don't have to do these projects and push them out. I mean, that's a possibility. If that's what has to happen, that's what happens. But just know that in the future, it's not going to cost $100,000 a mile. We're going to be talking, you know, $300,000 a mile, possibly more. And as, you know, costs go up every year, the farther you push them out, the higher the costs are gonna be for materials, asphalt, oil, that sort of thing. So that's, I put together this plan just to see, you know, some people say you can't put together a plan for that far out, you know, 5 years is plenty. And I see that, I get that, but we need a snapshot of what we need for the, you know, foreseeable future. And this basically puts out all of our roads, all of our county highways to one full cycle of getting resurfaced.
And I will say you know, when I think about comparable counties to the south and to the north of us, Price County is doing $1.7 million of debt levy per year just for road construction. And Bayfield County is doing $1.5 million a year for 5 years for road construction. And so what they're not going as far out as Matt is. They're basically saying, let's pull in, you know, let's pull in $6-7 million and see how far that gets us. And in 5 years, I'll reassess it to see if they have to continue that. And so we are, I mean, every county's different, every county funds differently, but you know, again, this is a policy decision that the board is ultimately going to have to weigh in on, is do they want to try to maintain, you know, $1 million or more a year for road construction?
So some of these items in my plan also, if you look at it, in the 2022, I have County Highway C, a seal coat, $250,000. County C was paved the stretch from basically the mill and then by the golf course there up to Minersville. That was paved in 2017 after it was washed out many places in the flood. If you remember, the state used it as a detour route for Highway 13. They paid for that to be repaved for us. I would like to see it seal coated now to help preserve that pavement life out more years, so we can push that resurface cost out also. If we can do that, we can gain years in our pavements and gain savings that way. They recommend new pavements to be sealed within the first 5 years. I see it ideal would be the 3rd year you would reseal it, out to 5. After you get out past 5, you know, maybe a little bit longer, 6-7 years, then the resealing basically doesn't help you. It's not cost effective because your pavements are already starting to break down enough that the resealing is not going to, like I say, be cost effective to do it at that point.
Okay.
Thank you, Matt. I appreciate the long plan, the amount of information you put together. And these are the kinds of things we should be looking at, because it does give us at least some kind of outlook that we can try to base decisions on. Like Clark said, we can reevaluate these in 3 years, 5 years, but if we don't even have a basis, you know, it makes it harder for everybody. So thank you for taking my picking on, because you were here. So
That's why I gave to answer questions and just kind of explain it.
yeah.
Dick has a question.
Sure.
Good.
Can't we operate under
Is he by a mic?
Yeah, you can bring it closer to you.
it even work?
Yes.
Yeah, it works. Yeah, you just have to have it right next to your mouth.
Talk
All right.
directly into the microphone.
Are we ready?
Shoot.
Matt, can't we operate under the clean us dirty shirt syndrome? In other words, only do what you have to do. I know you have a schedule of this many roads this year, this many next year, but do they deteriorate in that order too? Because it's nice to have a schedule for maintenance upkeep, but we don't have a regular amount of money coming in every year to cover that. So if you can, say, put off 2 projects for one summer, that's gonna save us a hell of a lot of money. I heard what you're saying, that if they get to a point where they're too bad, then it's gonna cost you more. I understand that. But isn't there a fine line in there where you can just say, well, this one probably will last another year? Because that's a big deal.
So, yeah, I mean, we could look at them, but these are projecting out from when they were paved the last time. So, you know, maybe one would hold a little bit better for another year or 2. But if we push it off this year, that pushes it to next year, right? And then that pushes that project off to the next year or 2 years, and it just, it snowballs from there. And how are you ever going to catch up once you start that snowball? Once you lose that momentum, then eventually you're going to keep pushing projects off. And eventually they're going to get to that stage where they cannot be resurfaced. They'll have to go to reconstruct. And then you're talking 2.5 to 3 times the cost for that project. So if you can keep up as when they're in better shape per se, you know, they're not that they're good, because they're bad, they get potholes, they're starting to break up, getting running. But if you let them go until they're all this little alligator cracked out, that asphalt is totally useless at that point. It has to be all taken up or ground up and redone at that point.
Well, at least it gives you something to think about.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, we need to look at them at each road if it needs it. You know, right now, Highway GG is on my schedule for next year. That we put a fair amount of dollars into that last year, trying to do some rock paving, and there were just, I think we used 5 loads of pothole patch just in 1 month alone last year, trying to keep up with the potholes. It's not sustainable. I mean, that's just maintenance dollars. And if we keep going and leave it and not replace it, then we will have to go to a total replacement within 3 to 5 years.
Well, there actually is one other alternative, which you failed to bring up, Matt, is you just grind them up and go back to gravel roads.
That is an alternative. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the things that, again, as a county board and a highway committee, you may have to face in future years if, you know, road construction is up to you to decide. You get to decide the debt levy that you want to impose on the citizens. And if you're not in favor of that, it's probably beneficial to make long-term plans to say some roads we're just going to let go, because maybe save your highest traffic roads, and then the ones that have the lowest traffic, you know, obviously you have, the problem is you're going to have in the springtime, if you have trucking, lumber or milk, you know, it's really hard to bring, you know, heavyweight trucks on a gravel road, but those are kind of some of your long-term decisions that you should work on.
So Matt, the long-term problem with higher taxes is people leave. It's harder to keep businesses level and attractive, and the more people and businesses that we lose or don't get, this makes it all harder in the long run. So there could be a time where, you know, gravel roads is certainly one of them, and my understanding is in the state, there are more roads being let go of gravel now than before. It's not an uncommon thing anymore. There may be times where, say, Madeline Island, you've got a road there you're hauling a lot of rock for. And it might be at some point in the future that you say, you know what, we can't keep spending the kind of money and manpower and use of equipment that we are putting into one place to try to stabilize the bank, and that may well be a losing battle anyway over the long term. And you might say, you know what, that's going to erode, and instead of people being able to make the full loop there, everybody can still get to where they're going, but some people are going to have a bit longer route then. And if you look at the map of Madeline Island and the residents, and you did a little calculating, you could say, yeah, some of these people, this number of people are going to have to drive this much further. How do I balance that with these roads that are down county that get a lot more use? So there might be some things like that at some point and say, you know, that's just how it's going to be. And for people that live out in the country, you know, you do a lot of driving anyway. And if the people on the island, a few of them have to do a little bit more, is that any different than people down county coming up to Athens to do their business and stuff. They put on lots of miles to get here. So it might be some things like that that change that in the long run save you money. You just can't justify putting that kind of money into one spot to shorten the trips for a few. And you know, I've driven on plenty of country roads out here and do all the time. And so when some of these roads in Bayfield County get redone, that's really nice. But I put lots of miles on those roads, and that's benefiting a large number of people versus a little shorter path for a few. And those sort of things you got to bring to the highway committee and look at your long-term plan. I do understand what you're saying about the maintenance issue, and it's a big deal. But at the same time, when people can't afford to live here, they leave. And I just learned that somebody else is left. And I'm really surprised that for a lot of them, how much it comes down to. Partly it's taxes, and then it's like, well, what is there to do up here? And it's not for everybody. And so when they start laying taxes with the other amenities that they like, we keep losing that population. We don't have the forest revenue of some of these other counties. That's just how it is. So it's not a fair comparison to some of the others. The administrator knows that. We got that green book that he gave us last year, and that came up. And we certainly don't have the lake properties of a lot of other counties up here. And so some of these counties in our neck of the woods, they've got sources of revenue that far exceed what we're going to have. We don't have lakes and we don't have large county forests. We're always going to be limited in those revenues, and we're going to have to manage it the best we can.
Sure. The good news is that for Madeline Island, the lake level appears to be down around a foot.
Yeah.
So
For now.
For now, I was up there last week, it's looking very good. The water back way from the Rockfield Lake. It actually is the beach now, so hopefully that continues to stay that way.
But with heavy rain forecasts, that we anticipate with climate change.
Yeah.
If we look at that prognosis, we can expect more and heavier rain events up there in Great Lakes region. So we should anticipate on average higher lake levels in the future than some of the low ones we saw a few years ago.
Well, and at the same time, we're also having an opposite effect because I've gotten 4 letters in the last month and a half about real estate agents running out of places to sell because there's so many people want to buy in our area and there's a lot of people moving in. So I'd be interested to see our data on those people moving in and those moving out too. Because if they're sending me 4 letters here, there's lots of movement up here. But I guess right now, I don't know if this is what I'm hearing or not. You guys are going to have to tell me because nobody seems to want to talk about the staff increases. I've heard one no. I've heard Gary from exec talk about, couple it with the healthcare. We've got those plans in place. We're looking for a consultant that can help us because a good consultant can actually save us enough to cover the plan and leave room in our budget. And coupling that with the consultants we have going through our processes and books and things. Like I said, I still feel like we got a couple carts in front of our horse to kind of start getting those things in the way. I'm not hearing any support for a staff increase at this time. Is that what I'm hearing?
Well, this is Pat. To me, it's too early to make a decision on any of that.
I can't understand you.
This is Pat. To me, it's too early to start penciling in anything. In particular, if we haven't identified ways to save any money by changing anything. If we can free up some money somehow, and I think based on my experience on the city council, when the department heads get together, try to figure out what can we live without or change or do differently or bring to the board or a committee if need be. When they put their heads together, they know best at how to create some efficiencies. If the department heads with the administrator can find some ways of doing some things differently that free up some money, then we have something to start working with. But we haven't done that yet. So we don't know what's on the table to work with.
From the departments I've talked to, and I haven't talked to Highway exactly, but some of the other moving pieces I have talked to, and they've already been looking at these because we were, without the stimulus money, we were already looking at, kind of a cataclysmic situation because as we can see, for the last 20 years, there hasn't been any kind of tweaking with our healthcare plan. So that hasn't had a long-term plan with it. And those things fall on the board. That's why I said, maybe this is my thought. I think as we're going forward, the committees need to start looking at their financial piece. They need to take responsibility for the departments that they deal with, and they need to have those conversations with those department heads. Like I said, I'm only chair of one committee, and that's what I'm already starting to do and looking at the different reports and trying to keep tabs on those things. I'm already working with another department, like working with the CJC to try to find alternatives to putting people in jail. Because one, it's better for our people, and two, it's better for our costs. And I can only do so much. And I'm not saying I'm any kind of savior here. I'm just saying I saw what I had in front of me, and those were the things that I can control at this point, is to try to be proactive. So my department heads have been talking to me about what they can cut and what kind of savings they're doing already. So I think each committee needs to start delving into their piece, because that's the granular stuff that we haven't had a long-term plan for, it doesn't feel. Because the situation we find ourselves in isn't something that popped up out of anywhere. I get we've got mandated costs, but these have been coming at us for a couple of decades. This is stuff we should have been planning for already. So I'm,
Dick has a comment.
like I said,
Sorry.
go ahead.
A couple of things, just quick here. We're going to have another meeting in about 15 minutes. One of the things in reference to
Can you talk into the mic, Dick?
reference to your department, or you're talking about the law enforcement committee.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. One of the things I think they should look at is to stop locking people up for minor offenses. I understand if you're a third-time offender or whatever, you're looking at some jail time. That's not doing anybody any good. For one thing, the cost of our operation is out of hand because of that. Other thing is what it does to the entire family and the guy that you're locking up. You
Yeah,
know,
we're already working on that, Dick. I am running every kind of alternative through every different resource that I can at this point. And each department is looking at their pieces.
Okay, the other thing I want to address briefly is the staff raises. Now, I've got a reputation for being employee orientated all my life, 25 years in the Greyhound Union and all my time on the city council, whatever. I always look out for the employees. There comes a time when the employees have got to face reality. If you don't have the money to give an increase in this situation with the COVID thing going around and our lack of cash and all that, it gets to a point where you're probably lucky you have a job. And the way I look at it, that I don't think we can afford to give any increases, at least until, like Pat said, until we come up with some money somewhere. I think it's status quo for the time being. And this, I hate to say that because in my life, I worked for Greyhound for 25 years, and it got to be the point where the last 3 contracts that we did, company was still making money, and we took decreases in wages. And over a period of 3 years, I lost 25% of my income. Think about that. 25%. How long did it take you to get to that point? 20 years. All of a sudden it's gone. So, you know, there are situations out there when you got to bite the bullet and operate your household on what you're making, and when things get better, we will give increases. That's all I got to say. Thank you.
Okay, I haven't heard from Mike, Ron, Marty.
I'm,
You guys have anything?
I'm on deck here, and
All right.
I was just recognized by Clark, and I'm sure he was going to make mention. Mike's got a comment or, but let me ask Clark on May 25th and 26th on his budget consultants. What are we expecting from these guys? Are we expecting some numbers so that we can digest some of the issues that we were talking about today? That's one item. Another item, as we all know, I worked with the Bureau of Indian Affairs, a government agency here in town. And it's a national, you have 12 regions across the country. And for the Bureau of Indian Affairs to come out and say, we don't have the money, we didn't get that funded from Congress, and we need to cut. Across the board, they did cut the budget. And we did cut the budget. And by cutting that budget, we all worked. We still all had our jobs. We still did our jobs in spite of that cut. I guess what I'm suggesting here, if we did a across-the-board budget cut, each one of these programs that we have here in Ashland County, they would continue to survive. Maybe not at the full staff or at the full where they're at right now. However, we will continue to survive with a lesser budget. That's number two. And I agree. As a matter of fact, I was over at the Town of Sanborn meeting just last night, and we were discussing some things like fire and ambulances and what have you. And it's come to my attention that they do not have any fire protection on the Bad River Reservation through the city of Ashland, but it's through the Bad River Volunteer Fire Department. However, they do have full ambulance service within the reservation boundaries, all the way up to the township line. So it was kind of enlightening for me to, even though I sat on the town board out there maybe 5 years ago or so, but still. Right now, I'm not in favor of what do you call it, COLA, cost of living for our employees. But perhaps what we should introduce to our budget consultants is a cut across the board, or maybe that may be a recommendation from them in order for us. God, excuse me, I had a tooth extracted last week, so I don't talk so well. At any rate, we do need to bring this budget back in sync. As I indicated to Clark earlier, the last 2 weeks, I says, who in their right mind is going to pass a budget, a deficit budget? That's totally unacceptable. But then we do, Ashland County has variables in there that are uncontrolled, such as these court orders. But we should have some savings someplace to address some of these court orders, if not fully, at a minimum. We know there's going to be court orders, and we have no control over that. However, with that being said, I'm losing my voice now. The Finance Committee and the Executive Committee, we've got a task in front of us that's monumental. And we need to work with the subcommittees, much like Laura had indicated, on a quarterly basis to see where they're at with their budgets at that given time. Is this the first time we've ever done this in the history of Ashland County? it's sort of coming to me that, gee, we've been running the same status quo for the last 2 decades, as Laura had indicated. That's 20 years. Life goes on. Hold it, time out. We need to back up and take a serious look at this. And that's what I'm coming to say. If we need to get tough and draw a line in the sand, it's not a 10%, it could be a 15%, it could be whatever. Everybody has to pay the bill, especially when the county board elects to fund some of these pet projects. But we really need to take a serious look at this, and it starts right here at the Finance Committee. And we're looking for suggestions, constructive suggestions. And of course, this is how Clark got these financial budget consultants to come in here. You know, $25,000. We can absorb that if these guys are going to make some constructive suggestions to us on how we can turn our budget process around and have a balanced budget or a surplus budget. Nothing would make me happy than to have a surplus budget. But that's what we're looking for at this point in time. So if we had a surplus budget, we can fund some of these court orders and some of these bills that come in that's not foreseen. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Ron, Marty, do you guys have something?
This is Ron. We have an opportunity here, not one that we like, but we've got to quit kicking the can down the road. We're going to have to make some hard decisions, but to do so, we're going to need a little bit more information to make those. But I think this has got to be the year that things change and we become fiscally responsible for the county. Thank you.
Thank you, Ron. Marty?
I agree that we need to make some changes here. And I'm concerned about the debt levy. I think we probably should take a closer look at implementing that, because that seems to be our only way out of the woods for the short immediate future here. But I do agree that we need much more information to work with.
Okay. So.
Chair Lady.
Yes.
We are running short on time.
I know.
I do need to make, I mean, evidently you're not going to make any policy decisions on the budget. I would like to.
You're stealing my thunder. I was going to move us along.
Your survey. So those are two things you have to do. The rest of it, you know, can be for another day, but I was directed to put an RFP together for audit firm. Make a decision if you want it or not. It's, you know. I will say Bayfield County basically put out an RFP in 2018. They got one respondent. Not very many people want to do audits in these small little rural counties up there as part of Woods, but we might get a respondent to this, and so the committee should decide, seek a motion to approve and send our RFP for an audit firm.
Do I hear a motion?
This is Pat. We have a firm that's auditing now. Are you looking for alternatives to the current firm, and if so, why? I'm not looking for an alternative. The Finance Committee directed me to put out an RFP for audit firms at the last meeting, and so this is the RFP. The current auditors are doing the 2020 audit, so they've been here. They were here a week in April. They're going to be producing this audit. It's going to come out probably in September or early October. What we'd be looking at is an audit for 2021, meaning we would engage somebody starting on January 1st, 2022. So, and I'm just following the directions that the committee wanted. So one more question. The current auditor has all of our background information. If we went to a different auditor, would there be any difference in staff time needed to provide information to the auditor? And I'm asking that question in part because we gave employees some extra time this week because they didn't get raises. And if they, just wondering if they have time in the workload to provide for a new one, if there's any considerations there.
The workload wouldn't happen until 2022. So basically because you would engage somebody in 2022 to do their 2020 audit. We're currently doing you'd be doing the workload in 2022 for the 2021 audit. We're currently doing the 2020 audit right now. If that makes sense.
Do I have a motion?
For an audit firm, I'm not gonna be here, so it's up to you guys if you want a new audit company or not.
I'll make that motion with a brief, I'm surprised that the Department of Revenue have not contacted us and asked us why we're using the same auditing firm for 28 years. That's kind of an unheard of thing. Typically for any government, state, federal, tribal, city government, they use different audit firms every 3 to 5 years. And for us to have the same auditing firm here for 28 years, that's practically unheard of. I'd like to see some fresh blood here and get some real strong recommendations from these guys. It's been brought to my attention, the auditing firm has brought to the attention of the county board of the health $1.7 million in deficit, and they brought other things to our attention. But it's been the direction of the county board to operate the way it's always operated. But if we see this information in different contexts from a different auditing firm, well, like Ron had just indicated, this year we've got some tough decisions to make. So did Marty say, and I think this is one that we need to follow through with. However, Clark did indicate, well, Bayfield County, they put this out on RFP and they only got one solicitor, one person that will come in and do audit. Well, if the people that are currently auditing for us right now, if they're the only one, we've dotted our I's and crossed our T's. We've gone through the motion. And of course, that should pacify anything that Department of Revenue would come back at us and say, well, why are you guys using the same auditing firm? Hey, we put it out on RFP, these are the only people responded. We're doing our jobs. Does that make sense? I'm thinking.
This is
Okay.
Ron.
Yep, go ahead.
I'm going to second that motion. It's an RFP, so we'll just see what comes in. It can't hurt anything.
Is there any more discussion? Seeing none.
Other than that fact, it's been brought to my attention to some of our staff here that we have a individual here right across the street that is considering throwing their name in a hat for auditing Ashley County books. So I'm hoping that's true. But with that being said, let's see what goes.
Okay, any more discussion?
Marty?
Marty, this is Marty. Could you repeat the motion? I didn't quite catch it all.
He just made the motion to send out the RFP, correct?
That's correct. That's the
Okay.
motion. Send out the RFP. It's in your packet. I wrote it up.
Yep.
Proposed timeline where you're going to meet again. Yeah, so you just have to you're just making a motion to approve the RFP.
Okay, any more questions? Seeing none. All those in favor of sending out the RFP, please signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Okay, that carries. And what else did you say? Oh, and the surveys, correct?
I don't know if you mean, survey might take longer than you 1 minute you have. I basically put together, Bayfield County put together a survey. They just sent it out, it's unscientific. They just put it on Facebook and, nothing, they got about 300 responses on it last year. If you want to do something like this, we can do this. If not, like I say, it's not scientific, it's not random. It's just people giving feedback to the county concerning how do you want to spend the money? And also, how do you want to spend the federal money coming in? The $3 million is coming in. And I was looking for a policy decision from this committee if they want to basically look at our non-mandated community contributions to do that. I did not get direction from that. And so this is your decision.
This is Pat. I'll make a motion that we direct the administrator to work with Extension to do a survey and include the community's programs in the questions there, and also with the federal stimulus money.
Okay, I have a motion. Is someone a second?
This is Ron. I'd second that motion.
Okay, any more discussion?
This is Pat. I'd like to speak to that. I own land in Bayfield County, so I do their survey. And part of why I find that survey helpful is I do get to provide some input on that. So Bayfield County, for example, is putting more money into roads. I listed that as my top priority, and I benefit from those roads where I drive, and I'm happy to pay for them. But I think part of the reason for the survey is we're going to engage the people that live here more in terms of what we're doing. It's going to help them understand all the things that the county does that they may not realize the county does. And it'll also, as a committee and a board, help us to make more informed decisions in terms of what the public is willing to support or not support. I think that engagement will help the county in the future when it asks for a referendum to increase the general levy, because that day will come again too.
I would think we've all been talking about different people that we've talked to. We could always make sure they had a link to this or a piece of paper with this on to make sure we get their intentions and their wishes in writing. So is there anything else from anyone? I'm hearing none. So we have a motion, a second, to have Extension do this survey with direction about the community money. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Okay, looks like we passed that. Okay, next meeting date, verbal administrator at updates.
Our next meeting date will be on the 27th of May, where we're going to be going over the RFP for the healthcare consultants. So that will be, if we get two or three consultants that we deem worthy, we'll have them come in and do a presentation for you, and you can pick one at that point.
Did you say the 2nd or the 27th?
27th.
27th.
27th of May. You'll also see in your RFP for the auditor a June 22nd meeting to go over the RFP results for the RFP for auditors. So
Okay. If there isn't anything else, I'm looking for the motion to adjourn.
Ron will make a motion, we adjourn.
Thank you, Ron. A second.
Second, Mike.
All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Lori.
Anybody want to stay?
Lori,